The boutique door shouldn't have been unlocked at 11:30 at night. Elizabeth Kim knew this. She'd turned the sign to close 20 minutes ago, counted the register twice, and was already mentally planning tomorrow's window display when she heard the crash. Not a knock. A crash. The glass door swung wide and a man stumbled through, one hand pressed against his ribs, the other gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing keeping him upright. Blood seeped between his fingers, dark and wet under the fluorescent lights. Elizabeth froze behind the counter. The man lifted his head. His face was sharp, angular, younger than she'd expected for someone bleeding out in her shop. His expensive suit was torn at the shoulder. His tie hung loose, and when his sleeve rode up as he steadied himself against a clothing rack, she saw it. The eagle tattoo. Black ink. Wings spread wide across his forearm. She'd seen that mark before, whispered about in Koreatown, attached to names. People didn't say out loud. Her throat went dry. "Sorry," he said in Korean, his voice rough but strangely polite. "Wrong door." He wasn't leaving, though. His knees buckled slightly, and he caught himself on a display table, knocking over a stack of scarves she'd spent an hour arranging. Elizabeth's brain screamed at her to run. Call the police, lock herself in the back room. But her hands moved on autopilot, reaching for the first aid kit she kept under the register. Her mother had been a nurse. Some instincts were carved too deep to ignore. "Sit," she said, nodding toward the chair by the fitting rooms. He blinked at her, surprised. Then he smiled, just a little, before limping toward the chair and dropping into it with a grunt. Elizabeth grabbed the kit and crossed the floor, her heels clicking against the hardwood. She knelt beside him, hands steady despite the fear thrumming through her chest. She pulled his hand away from the wound, a gash along his ribs, deep but not fatal. She'd seen worse during her mother's late-night ER shifts when she'd tagged along as a kid. "You should go to a hospital," she said, pressing gauze against the cut. "Can't." "Then you should leave. Working on it." She taped the gauze down, wrapped his torso with medical tape, and stood. Her eyes flicked to the safe behind the counter, hidden beneath a false panel. 3 months of supplier payments. Contracts for next season's inventory. Everything she'd built after her mother died, and the bills swallowed her savings. She moved casually toward the register, positioning herself between him and the back wall. He noticed. Of course, he noticed. "Relax," he said, leaning back in the chair. "I'm not here to rob you. Just bleed on my floor?" He laughed, then winced. "Fair." Elizabeth grabbed a bottle of water from her bag and handed it to him. He took it, studying her face as he drank. "You speak Korean," he said. "My mother was from Busan." "You don't look Korean." "I'm aware." He smiled again, wider this time. "You're calm. Most people would have screamed by now." "Screaming doesn't stop bleeding." He tilted his head, something like respect flickering across his face. "What's your name?" "Elizabeth." "Junho." He extended a hand. She didn't take it. He dropped it, unbothered, and glanced around the boutique. His gaze lingered on the racks of dresses, the curated jewelry displays, the minimalist design she'd painstakingly chosen to make the space feel high-end without feeling cold. "Nice place," he said. "You own it?" "Yes." "Business good?" "Good enough." "You're lying." Elizabeth's jaw tightened. "Excuse me? Your inventory's low. You've got sale signs in the window, but no clearance racks. And you're here past midnight doing paperwork." He nodded toward the open ledger on the counter. "Cash flow problem?" "Before we continue, if you're already hooked by where this is going, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You'll want to. See how this story ends, and don't forget to tell us where you are watching from." Now back to Elizabeth and the dangerous stranger in her boutique. She stared at him. "That's none of your business." "You're right." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I know what it looks like when someone's smart enough to keep things running but doesn't have enough capital to grow." I see it all the time. In what line of work? His smile turned sharp. Import, export. Elizabeth crossed her arms. That's vague. It's supposed to be. They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Junho reached into his jacket pocket and she tensed, but he only pulled out a slim leather wallet. He thumbed through a stack of bills and placed several $100s on the armrest of the chair. For the trouble, he said, I don't want your money. It's not a gift. It's payment. You helped me. I'm paying you. You stumbled into my shop uninvited, and you didn't call the cops. He stood slowly, testing his balance. That's worth something. Elizabeth didn't move as he walked toward the door, each step deliberate and controlled despite the injury. He paused at the threshold, one hand on the frame, and glanced back. You've got a good head for numbers, he said. If you ever get tired of retail, give me a call. He pulled a business card from his pocket and set it on the nearest table. Plain white card, black lettering, a phone number, and nothing else. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night like he'd never been there at all. Elizabeth stood alone in her boutique, the hum of the overhead lights suddenly too loud. She looked at the money on the chair, at the blood on her floor, at the business card on the table. She picked up the card, and against every logical instinct screaming at her to throw it away, she slipped it into her pocket. 3 days passed before Elizabeth touched the card again. She'd shoved it in her desk drawer, buried under invoices and fabric samples, telling herself she'd throw it out later, but every time she opened the drawer, her fingers hesitated. The card sat there like a dare. On the 4th day, her landlord called about the rent increase. On the 5th, her primary fabric supplier threatened to pull her account unless she cleared her outstanding balance within 2 weeks. On the 6th day, she pulled out the card. The number rang twice before a woman answered in crisp Korean. Yes? I'm calling for Junho. A pause. Your name? Elizabeth Kim. One moment. The hold music was classical, unexpected. When the line clicked back, it was his voice. The boutique owner, Junho said, and she could hear the smile in his tone. Didn't think you'd call. I wasn't planning to. What changed? Nothing. I'm just curious about your offer. Liar. Elizabeth's grip tightened on the phone. You don't know me well enough to call me a liar. I know desperation when I see it, and I saw it in your eyes the night we met. His voice softened, just slightly. What do you need? She should have hung up, should have found another way. But the words came out anyway. You said something about laundering problems. As a joke. Did I? Your cash flow structure is outdated. You're probably still using physical drop points and middlemen who take a percentage. It's inefficient, and it leaves trails. She spoke quickly, clinically, the way she used to when presenting market analyses in her MBA program. If you integrated cryptocurrency wallets with peer-to-peer networks, you could decentralize transactions, reduce risk, cut costs by at least 30%. Silence on the other end. She pressed forward. You'd keep your existing structure for stability, but you'd layer in modern tech, gradually. Test it with small amounts first. Scale up once you've confirmed security. Protocols. It's not about replacing what works. It's about evolution. More silence. Then Junho laughed. Actually laughed, the sound rich and genuine. You're serious, he said. You asked what I needed. I'm showing you what I'm worth. Where did you study? Wharton. Graduated top of my class. And you're running a boutique in Koreatown. My mother got sick during my 2nd year working in finance. Medical bills don't pay themselves. Her voice flattened. I came home. She died anyway. The boutique was hers. I kept it running. The line went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Heavier. I'm sorry, Junho said, and he sounded like he meant it. Elizabeth didn't know what to do with that. Are you interested or not? Meet me tomorrow. 2 o'clock. I'll text you the address. For what? Lunch. We'll talk details. I don't want lunch. I want to know if you're serious about working together. I am. But I need to look at you when we discuss business. His tone shifted, became more formal. If we're doing this, we do it properly. Face to face. No phone calls. She wanted to argue, but something in his voice told her it wasn't negotiable. Fine. 2 o'clock. Wear something comfortable. The place is nice, but not stuffy. He hung up before she could respond. Elizabeth set the phone down and stared at the wall of her tiny office. Inventory boxes stacked to the ceiling. A desk that wobbled when she wrote. A space heater because the building's heating barely worked in winter. She'd built this place from nothing. From grief and debt and sheer stubbornness. And now she was about to walk into the world of a man with an eagle tattooed on his arm. Her hands were shaking. She forced them still. The restaurant was in a part of the city Elizabeth rarely visited. Tree-lined streets, brick buildings with ivy crawling up the walls. Sunlight filtered through the leaves in golden patches that danced across the sidewalk. Junho waited outside, leaning against a black sedan, hands in his pockets. He wore a charcoal suit. No tie this time, the top button of his shirt undone. The gash on his ribs had healed enough that he moved without wincing. He straightened when he saw her. You came? I said I would. People say a lot of things. He opened the restaurant door for her, and they stepped into a space that felt more like someone's home than a business. Low lighting, dark wood tables. Only 6 tables total, half of them empty. A hostess led them to a corner booth, private, and tucked away from the other diners. Junho slid into the seat across from her, his movements easy and controlled. Order whatever you want, he said, handing her a menu. It's on me. This isn't a date. I know, it's a business meeting, but you still need to eat. She glanced at the menu. Everything was in Korean. No prices listed. Junho watched her, his expression unreadable. You speak Korean fluently. You understand. Finance. You stayed calm when a bleeding stranger walked into your shop. He leaned forward slightly. Where did you learn to think like that? My mother worked nights. I learned to handle emergencies young. That's not what I mean. Then what do you mean? Most people freeze when they're scared. You assess. You analyze. You act. His eyes narrowed. That's not something you learn from a textbook. Elizabeth met his gaze. You're right. You learn it when you watch your mother die slowly because the insurance company denies her treatment 3 times. You learn it when you're 26 and suddenly responsible for funeral costs and business debt and a lease you can't break. Her voice didn't waver. You learn to think fast or you drown. Junho nodded slowly, something shifting in his expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. I want to hire you, he said. For what? Consulting, legitimate businesses. I have investments, properties, legal operations that need restructuring. He paused. Nothing criminal. You're a criminal. I'm a businessman with a complicated portfolio. That's semantics. It's the truth. Elizabeth stared at the contract on her kitchen table. 6 figures. Annually. For consulting work that, on paper, looked entirely legal. Real estate acquisitions, tax optimization, corporate restructuring. Her phone buzzed. Junho's name lit up the screen. Did you sign? I'm reading it. It's been 3 days. It's a contract. I'm being thorough. She heard him exhale, amused. What's holding you back? Common sense. That didn't stop you from calling me. He was right. She hated that he was right. I'll sign, she said, but I have conditions. Name them. I don't touch anything illegal. If I see something that crosses a line, I walk. No questions. No consequences. Agreed. And I keep the boutique. This doesn't own me. I wouldn't want it to. She picked up the pen. Her signature looked small on the dotted line, but it felt enormous. Done, she said. Good. Start Monday. I'll have my assistant send you the files. The files arrived in a sleek, black briefcase, hand-delivered by a woman in her 40s who introduced herself as Ms. Park. She wore glasses and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Elizabeth spread the documents across her dining table that weekend. Property deeds, tax returns, partnership agreements, offshore accounts that made her stomach twist, even though technically they were legal. By Monday morning, she had a list of 17 operational inefficiencies and 4 potential lawsuits waiting to happen. Junho's office was on the 23rd floor of a glass building downtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows, minimalist furniture, a view that stretched across the entire city. He sat behind his desk in shirt sleeves, reading something on his laptop. He looked up when she entered. You found problems already? Several. She set her folder on his desk and walked him through each issue. A supplier contract with a termination clause that could bankrupt him if triggered. A merger negotiation where the other party was overvalued by 40%. A tax structure that would draw audits within 6 months. Junho listened without interrupting. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair. The merger, he said. I already signed the preliminary agreement. Then unsign it. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. The deal is bad. Pull out now before you lose real money. The other party is connected, politically, financially. Walking away sends a message. Elizabeth crossed her arms. What kind of message? That I'm weak, that I can be pressured. Or it sends the message that you're smart enough not to make stupid investments. His jaw tightened. I need this partnership. No, you want it. There's a difference. They stared at each other across the desk. The air felt charged, tense. I'm moving forward with the merger, he said finally. Then you're making a mistake. Noted. Elizabeth grabbed her folder and walked out. 2 weeks later, the supplier went bankrupt. Elizabeth got the call at 7 in the morning. The company Junho had merged with had ties to the supplier. When the supplier collapsed, it triggered the termination clause she'd warned him about. $3 million. Gone. She showed up at his office unannounced. Ms. Park tried to stop her, but Elizabeth walked past her straight into Junho's office. He was on the phone, his voice clipped and angry. He saw her and ended the call. I know, he said before she could speak. Do you? It's handled. $3 million isn't handled, it's hemorrhaged. He stood, walked to the window. His reflection looked tired in the glass. I underestimated the risk. I told you the risk. You ignored me. I made a judgment call. A bad one. He turned to face her. Are you here to gloat? I'm here to make sure you don't do it again. Something in his expression softened. Not much, but enough. What do you suggest? Let me do my job. Stop pushing deals because they, make you look strong. Start making decisions based on data. She stepped closer. You hired me for a reason. Trust it. Junho studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. Okay? Okay? You're right. I should have listened. Elizabeth blinked. She hadn't expected that. You're actually admitting you were wrong? I'm not an idiot, just stubborn. He almost smiled. There's a difference. The calls started 2 days later. First, a reporter asking about her relationship with Junho Park. Then a former colleague from her finance days, nervous and probing. Then suppliers for her boutique, suddenly hesitant about fulfilling orders. Elizabeth sat in her shop after closing, scrolling through a gossip blog that had posted a photo of her entering Junho's building. The headline called her a mystery woman, linked to controversial businessman. Her phone rang. Junho. I saw the article, he said. So did half of Koreatown. I'll handle it. How? You can't erase. The internet. I can make them focus on something else. That's not the point. Elizabeth pressed her fingers against her temples. I'm losing clients. People are pulling orders. My reputation is, I'll compensate you. I don't want compensation. I want my business back. Silence, then quietly, I'm sorry. She closed her eyes. I knew this was a risk. I just didn't think it would happen so fast. Do you want out? The question hung in the air. Elizabeth looked around her boutique, her mother's dream, her inheritance, but also empty racks, unpaid invoices, a business slowly dying despite her best efforts. No, she said. I want to finish what we started. Why? Because for the first time in 3 years, I'm using my brain for something that matters. Her voice steadied. And because I think you actually want to change. I see it when you talk about your investments. You're not just building an empire. You're trying to build something that lasts. That's optimistic. It's observant. She heard him exhale. There's someone coming after me, auditing my accounts. His name is Han Sung-jae. Elizabeth straightened. What kind of audit? The kind that doesn't stop until it finds something. Is there something to find? Not anymore. You've cleaned up most of it. Most? There are threads, old connections, things that take time to sever completely. Elizabeth's heart hammered. How much time do we have? Weeks, maybe less. She stood, pacing her small office. Then we work faster. The documents arrived at 2 in the morning. Elizabeth sat in Junho's conference room, surrounded by file boxes and cold coffee. Ms. Park had left hours ago. The cleaning crew had come and gone. It was just her and the fluorescent hum of overhead lights. She traced her finger down a spreadsheet, flagging another discrepancy. A payment to a shell company that no longer existed. Small enough to miss, large enough to destroy everything if Han Sung-jae found it. The door opened. Junho stepped inside, still wearing his suit from earlier, though he'd ditched the jacket somewhere. He looked at the boxes, then at her. You should go home. I'm almost done. You said that 3 hours ago. Elizabeth circled another line item. This account needs to close by Friday, and this partnership agreement has language that could implicate you in things you're not involved in anymore. He moved closer, reading over her shoulder. His cologne was faint, expensive. Cedar and something darker. You're good at this, he said quietly. I know. I mean it. Most consultants would have missed half of what you've caught. She glanced up at him. His face was closer than she'd expected. Tired lines around his eyes. A scar above his left eyebrow she hadn't noticed before. Why are you really doing this? She asked. Doing what? Trying to go legitimate. You could keep running things the way they are. It's clearly profitable. Junho pulled out a chair and sat beside her. My father built this empire on fear. He died afraid, in hiding, alone. He looked at his hands. I don't want that. So this is about legacy. It's about survival. The world is changing. Technology makes it easier to track money, to connect dots. The old ways won't last. He met her eyes. I either evolve or I disappear. And you think I can help you evolve. I know you can. Something shifted between them, an understanding that felt heavier than business. Elizabeth broke eye contact first. We need to accelerate the timeline. If Han is moving, we don't have weeks. What do you need? Access to everything. No more locked files. No more intermediaries. Done. And I need you to trust that I know what I'm doing, even when it's uncomfortable. Junho smiled, just barely. I'm starting to learn that. Han Sung-jae made his move on a Tuesday. Elizabeth was reviewing acquisition proposals when Ms. Park burst into the conference room, her usual composure shattered. They're here! Federal agents, they have a warrant. Elizabeth's blood went cold. Where's Junho? Downstairs, meeting them in the lobby. She gathered the sensitive documents, her hands moving on autopilot. Get these to legal, now. Everything on that desk, goes into the shredder. Ms. Park hesitated. Is that? It's redacted duplicates. They're useless, but they look important. Move. Elizabeth took the stairs down, her heels echoing in the concrete stairwell. By the time she reached the lobby, Junho was speaking with two agents in dark suits. Han Seung-jae stood behind them, arms crossed, watching. He was older than she'd expected. Gray hair, wire-rimmed glasses, the kind of man who looked like he taught economics, not hunted criminals. Junho saw her approach. His expression stayed neutral, but she caught the warning in his eyes. Stay back. She ignored it. Can I help you, gentlemen? She asked, stepping beside Junho. Han's gaze shifted to her. And you are? Elizabeth Kim, Chief Financial Consultant. Consultant. He said it like the word tasted bad. How long have you worked here? 6 weeks. Long enough to see some interesting transactions, I imagine. Long enough to restructure some inefficient ones. She kept her voice level, professional. If you have questions about our financial operations, I'm happy to provide documentation. We'll be the judge of what we need. Han nodded to the agents. Start with the executive floor. Financial, records, all of them. The agents moved toward the elevators. Junho's jaw tightened, but he didn't stop them. Han lingered, studying Elizabeth with sharp eyes. You look familiar. Where did you study? Wharton. So you know better than to work for someone like him. I work for a legitimate business with legal operations. For now. Han smiled thinly. People around Mr. Park tend to get caught in the crossfire. Just something to consider. He followed the agents to the elevator, leaving Elizabeth and Junho standing in the silent lobby. That was stupid, Junho said quietly. That was necessary. He'll dig into you now. Let him. I'm clean. Junho turned to face her fully. This isn't a game. Han doesn't just investigate. He destroys. Anyone connected to me becomes a target. I know what I signed up for. Do you? His voice dropped. Because once you're marked, you don't just walk away. Your boutique, your reputation, your life, it all becomes evidence. Elizabeth stepped closer, lowering her voice. Then we make sure he finds nothing. We've cleaned up the accounts. The paper trail is solid, and if he pushes harder, we push back with lawyers and legitimate documentation. And if that's not enough, it will be, because I made it enough. They held each other's gaze. The lobby felt too bright, too exposed. You should go home, Junho said finally. I'll handle this. We handle this. Together. Something flickered in his expression. Gratitude, maybe, or fear that she was making a mistake. But he nodded. The call came at midnight. Elizabeth was asleep when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello? Ms. Kim? A man's voice, unfamiliar. You need to come to the warehouse district. Pier 17. It's about Mr. Park. Her heart stopped. What happened? Just come. Alone. The line went dead. Elizabeth threw on jeans and a jacket, grabbed her keys. Every rational thought screamed this was a trap. But the fear in the caller's voice had sounded real. The warehouse district was dark, abandoned buildings looming like broken teeth against the night sky. She parked near Pier 17 and stepped out into the humid air. A figure emerged from the shadows. Young, Korean, blood on his shirt. You're Elizabeth? Where's Junho? Inside. They ambushed him. Russians. They're connected to one of the suppliers he cut off last month. Elizabeth's breath caught. Is he alive? For now, but they're making demands. She followed him into the warehouse. The space was cavernous, dimly lit by overhead bulbs. In the center, Junho sat in a chair, hands zip-tied behind him. 3 men surrounded him. One held a gun. Junho's head snapped up when he saw her. What the hell are you doing here? Saving you, apparently. The man with the gun turned toward Elizabeth. His face was weathered, scarred across the left cheek. "Who's this?" "Nobody," Junho said quickly. "She's nobody. Let her leave." The scarred man smiled. "She drove here in the middle of the night. She's not nobody." Elizabeth forced herself to breathe slowly. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "When you're afraid, assess. Don't freeze." "I'm his accountant," she said. "If you want money, I can access his accounts." "We don't want money. We want respect." "Then you're negotiating with the wrong person. He can't give you respect with a gun to his head." The scarred man laughed, but it was humorless. "You're brave, stupid, but brave. I'm practical. You kill him, you start a war you can't win. His people will come after you. All of you." She kept her voice steady. "But if you let him go, you look reasonable. You make your point without the bloodshed. Why would we trust that? Because he's trying to go legitimate. He's cutting ties with operations like yours. It's not personal. It's business evolution." She glanced at Junho. "Tell them." Junho's jaw clenched. "She's right. I'm restructuring. The supplier cuts weren't about you. They were about reducing risk." The scarred man exchanged looks with his companions. One of them muttered something in Russian. "We'll consider it," he said finally. "But next time, show more courtesy. A phone call, transition period. Not just cutting us off." "Agreed." The scarred man jerked his head toward the door. "Take her and go. And remember this conversation." Two of Junho's men appeared from the shadows, moving fast. They cut his restraints and formed a protective barrier. Elizabeth didn't realize she was shaking until Junho gripped her arm, steadying her. They walked out together, not running, but not slow. The night air felt impossibly cold. In the car, Junho turned to her. "That was reckless. It worked. You could have been killed. So could you." He stared at her, something raw in his expression. Then he pulled her close, his forehead touching hers. "Don't do that again. Don't get kidnapped again." He laughed, the sound shaky. "Deal." Han's investigation stalled 3 weeks later. The audit found restructuring, not crime, clean books, legal transitions. By the time his team finished, there was nothing to prosecute. Junho's reputation shifted, not overnight, but gradually. Businessman, not gangster. Investor, not criminal. Elizabeth's boutique reopened with new backing, a full inventory, and a waiting list for custom pieces. She hired 2 employees, her mother's dream, finally sustainable. On a Saturday morning, Junho showed up at the shop with coffee. "Busy?" he asked. "Always." He set the coffee on her desk. "I have a question." Elizabeth looked up from her sketches. "What kind of question?" "The kind that involves a ring." Her breath stopped. He pulled a small box from his pocket, opened it. Simple band. Single diamond. Nothing flashy. "I'm not good at this," he said. "And I know my world is complicated. Dangerous, sometimes. But you've seen the worst of it, and you're still here." He met her eyes. "Marry me. Not because it's logical, because I can't imagine doing any of this without you." Elizabeth's vision blurred. She'd spent 3 years surviving, building, fighting alone. "Yes," she whispered. 5 years later, Elizabeth stood in the executive suite of Park Enterprises, watching the city sprawl below. COO. The title still felt surreal. Junho appeared in the doorway, their daughter's laughter echoing from somewhere down the hall where Ms. Park was reading to them. "Ready for the community center opening?" he asked. "Almost." She straightened his tie. "You're nervous. It's a big investment. It's a good investment. Youth programs, job training, resources for immigrant families. Your father would never have done this." "That's the point." She kissed him. "I'm proud of you. We did this together." "We did." They walked down the hall, hand in hand. Their daughters ran to meet them, dark curls bouncing, chattering about the books Ms. Park had read. Elizabeth thought about that night. The blood on her boutique floor, the business card she almost threw away, the single decision that changed everything. She'd taken a risk on a dangerous man, and he'd taken a risk on a woman who refused to be afraid. Neither of them had known where it would lead. But standing here, watching Junho kneel to lift their youngest daughter into his arms, Elizabeth knew one thing with certainty. Some doors are meant to open, even when they crash through in the middle of the night, even when logic says run. Sometimes the most dangerous choice becomes the one that saves you. If you enjoyed Elizabeth and Junho's journey, go ahead and subscribe. We've got more incredible stories waiting for you. And drop a comment. Would you have answered that? Midnight call at the warehouse? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.